The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune in the Advanced Research Laboratory at Harrison Tech Institute. It was 7:30 in the evening and most of the scientists had gone home to their families. The whiteboard still bore the scribbled remnants of another frustrating day. Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the corridor with steady hands. At 19 years old he had been working the evening shift for nearly 2 years now. His yellow rubber gloves were worn but clean and his red maintenance uniform was always pressed. His mother Sarah had taught him that honest work deserved honest effort no matter what the work might be. The mathematics department was Marcus's last stop each night. He had always lingered there a bit longer than necessary. While he wiped down the desks and emptied the waste bins, his eyes would wander to the equations on the boards. Numbers had always made sense to him in a way that little else did. They were like a language he had been born speaking. Professor David Richardson stood alone in the main laboratory that evening. His silver hair was disheveled and his tie hung loose around his neck. He had been at the university for 35 years and had never encountered a problem quite like this one. The equation on the board before him had stumped the entire department for months. It was a complex proof related to quantum computing that could revolutionize the field. But the solution remained just out of reach. David barely noticed when Marcus entered the room. The young man began his usual routine, emptying the recycling bins and wiping down the surfaces. But Marcus's eyes kept drifting to the whiteboard. The numbers seemed to pulse with possibility. "Impossible thing, isn't it?" David said suddenly. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion. Marcus paused in his work. "Sir, that equation, we've had teams working on it. Consultants from 3 different countries. All of them brilliant minds. And yet here it sits mocking us." Marcus moved closer to the board. His cleaning cloth hung forgotten in his hand. "May I look at it, sir?" David gestured wearily. "Be my guest. Though I warn you, it's been known to cause headaches." What happened next would become the talk of the institute for years to come. Marcus set down his supplies and stood before the whiteboard. His eyes moved across the symbols and numbers with an intensity that made David take notice. The young man's hand reached out tentatively toward a marker. "May I?" Marcus asked. Something in David's chest stirred. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was simply too much coffee and too little hope. "Go ahead." Marcus began to write. His movements were confident despite his worn gloves. He flipped the equation, approached it from an angle that seemed almost naive in its simplicity. But as the numbers flowed from his marker, David felt his breath catch. 6 minutes passed. Then 7. Marcus stepped back from the board. "I think this works," he said quietly. David moved forward slowly. His eyes scanned the work before him. His hand rose to his mouth. The solution was elegant. It was beautiful. It was correct. "How did you?" David's voice trailed off. "The pattern," Marcus said. "It reminded me of something I read once. About fractals and infinite sequences. I just thought if you approached it as a series of smaller problems instead of one large one." The door to the laboratory opened and 3 other people entered. Dr. Robert Chen had forgotten his briefcase. Dr. Emily Harper had returned for her notes. And Jolie Martinez, the department secretary, had come back to deliver a message to David. They all stopped short at the scene before them. David Richardson, renowned mathematician, was staring at the whiteboard with tears in his eyes. And beside him a young man in a maintenance uniform stood with a marker in his yellow-gloved hand. "Robert," David said hoarsely. "Emily, come look at this." The 2 scientists approached the board. The silence that followed was profound. Robert's hand trembled as he pointed to one line, then another. Emily covered her mouth with both hands. "This is it," Robert whispered. "David, this is actually it." "Who solved it?" Emily asked. David turned to Marcus. The young man had picked up his cleaning cloth again, as if uncertain whether he should still be there. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Williams, sir." "Marcus solved it," David said. "In 7 minutes Marcus solved what we've been struggling with for 8 months. Jolie stepped forward. She was a woman in her late 50s who had worked at the institute for decades. She had seen brilliant minds come and go. But she had never seen anything quite like this. Her eyes were bright with emotion as she looked at Marcus. "How long have you been cleaning this building, Marcus?" she asked gently. 2 years, ma'am. "And you understand this mathematics?" Marcus shifted his weight. "I read a lot. The library has free internet. And there are these lecture series online from universities. I've been watching them when I can. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of people realizing they had been blind to something precious. David Richardson felt something shift in his heart. He had 3 children of his own, all grown now with families of their own. He had spent decades teaching students who came from privilege and opportunity. But here before him stood a young man who had taught himself advanced mathematics between emptying trash cans and mopping floors. "Marcus," David said slowly, "tell me something. Why are you working as a cleaner?" The young man met his eyes steadily. "It's honest work, sir. My mother raised 3 of us on her own. She cleans houses during the day. I help with bills and I'm saving for community college. I've got about 2 more years before I'll have enough saved up." Emily Harper felt her throat tighten. She thought of her own children who had never wanted for anything. Who had complained about homework and skipped classes because they could. She looked at this young man who solved impossible equations in the margins of his life. "What if you didn't have to wait 2 more years?" David asked. Marcus looked confused. "Sir, what if you could start studying here now? What if we made that possible?" "I don't understand." Robert stepped forward. "Marcus, what Professor Richardson is trying to say is that you have a gift. A remarkable gift. And we've been looking at that equation every single day while you cleaned around us, and we never thought to ask if you might see something we couldn't." David pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly as he dialed. "Dean Morrison. Yes, I know it's late. But I need you to come to the mathematics lab right now. I promise you this cannot wait." The next hour felt like a dream to Marcus. Dean Patricia Morrison arrived still in her evening coat. She listened as David and Robert explained what had happened. She studied the whiteboard. She asked Marcus a series of questions about his education and his interests. "This is highly irregular," she said finally. But her eyes were warm. "However, I think irregular is exactly what we need. Marcus, I'm going to arrange for you to meet with our admissions committee tomorrow. And I'm going to personally recommend you for a full scholarship." Marcus felt his knees weaken. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Jolie said softly. She had been standing quietly to the side, but now she moved forward. "I've worked here for 28 years. I've seen a lot of smart people walk these halls. But what you have, Marcus, is more than intelligence. You have hunger. You have humility. You have hope. Don't let this moment pass you by." That night Marcus called his mother from the parking lot. Sarah Williams cried when he told her what had happened. She had prayed for her children every single day. She had worked until her hands ached. And now this blessing had arrived in the form of a whiteboard and some yellow rubber gloves. The story spread through the institute quickly. Some people were inspired. Others were skeptical. But David Richardson made sure that Marcus had every support he needed. The young man enrolled that spring semester while continuing to work part-time. Marcus never forgot where he came from. He still wore his old maintenance uniform sometimes when he studied late at night. It reminded him that knowledge can live anywhere. That brilliance doesn't announce itself with credentials. That a person's worth isn't measured by their job title. Years later, when Marcus earned his doctorate, David Richardson was in the front row. The old professor was retired by then, but he wouldn't have missed it for the world. Beside him sat Sarah Williams in her Sunday best. Her hands were still rough from years of cleaning, but her eyes shone with pride that could light up the sky. And on Marcus's office wall, when he eventually joined the faculty, he kept a photograph. It showed a whiteboard covered in equations and a pair of yellow rubber gloves resting on the desk below. A reminder that the greatest discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. That sometimes the person we overlook is the very person who holds the answer we've been searching for. That kindness and recognition can change a life. And that every single person we meet carries a story worth knowing and a gift worth discovering. All it takes is the wisdom to see it and the grace to honor it when we do.